They say the cruelest fate for an Omega is to serve at the mating ball while watching others find their destiny. But what they don't tell you is that sometimes, the server becomes the chosen one, and the wolves who forced her into servitude become witnesses to her coronation. Seraphine had scrubbed the grand ballroom floors of the Crimson Vale pack house for 3 days straight, her knees bruised and her hands raw from the harsh lye soap they insisted she use. The annual mating ball was tomorrow night, and as the pack's only unclaimed Omega over 21, she'd been assigned the most degrading task imaginable, serving drinks to the unmated wolves who would spend the evening searching for their destined mates. Make sure you keep your eyes down tomorrow night, Davina, the head Omega, instructed with barely concealed satisfaction. The older woman had never forgiven Seraphine for being born to the former Beta's bloodline, despite her Omega designation stripping her of any real status. The last thing we need is you making some poor Alpha uncomfortable with your presence. Seraphine nodded mutely, knowing that any response would only invite more cruelty. At 23, she should have found her mate by now. Most wolves felt the mate bond by their 20th year, but Seraphine had felt nothing at the last 2 mating balls she'd been permitted to attend as a guest. This year, Alpha Mordaunt had made it clear, if she hadn't found a mate by now, she never would, and therefore had no business participating as an eligible wolf. Perhaps it's a blessing. Her former friend Isolde had said with false sweetness just last week. Isolde, who'd found her mate at 19, and now held a respected position as a mated delta. Imagine what kind of weak wolf would be fated to someone like you. Someone like you. The words echoed through Seraphine's mind constantly. Someone whose wolf was so weak she could barely hold a shift for more than an hour. Someone whose scent was so faint that most wolves forgot she was in the room. Someone whose very existence seemed to be a cosmic joke, born to a powerful bloodline, but cursed with the designation that held no power at all. The Crimson Vale pack hadn't always been this way, or so her grandmother Alara claimed before she'd passed 2 years ago. Once Omegas had been valued for their calming influence, their ability to soothe aggressive wolves and maintain pack harmony. But under Alpha Mordaunt's rule, the pack had adopted the old ways, the brutal hierarchy where might made right and weakness was punished rather than protected. Seraphine's father, Tobias, had once been Beta of Crimson Vale, second only to the Alpha. But when Seraphine was born, an Omega, the shame had been too much. He'd stepped down from his position, and her mother Celeste had grown distant, as if looking at her daughter caused physical pain. Her older brother, Cassian, had left for another pack the moment he came of age, unable to bear the association with a defective sibling. Now, Seraphine lived in the servants' quarters, a converted storage room that smelled perpetually of mildew and old leather. She woke before dawn to prepare breakfast for the pack, spent her days cleaning and mending, and fell into her narrow cot each night too exhausted to dream. Tomorrow would be worse. Tomorrow, she would stand in her ill-fitting servant's uniform, carrying trays of champagne while watching other wolves find the one thing she'd been denied: a mate, a purpose, a future. The announcement came during the evening meal, delivered by Beta Lycon with an urgency that silenced the entire dining hall. "The Alpha King has sent word," Lycon declared, his voice carrying across the crowded room. "King Valdren of the Nightborn Sovereignty will be attending tomorrow's mating ball." The hall erupted into chaos. Wolves jumped to their feet, voices rising in excited speculation. The Alpha King hadn't attended a regional mating ball in over 5 years. Not since he'd ascended to power at the unprecedented age of 24 and united the fractured northern packs under one banner. Seraphine, serving soup at the lower tables, felt her stomach drop. This changed everything. The already high-pressure event had just become a spectacle of royal proportions. "Why would he come here?" someone asked loudly. "They say he's still searching for his true mate," a young female Delta answered, her eyes gleaming with ambition. 5 years as Alpha King, and he's refused every arranged match. If he's attending mating balls again, he must be desperate. Alpha Mordaunt stood, his powerful frame commanding immediate silence. "This is an unprecedented honor for Crimson Vale. Every unmated wolf of age will present themselves in their finest attire. We will show the Alpha King that our pack breeds strong wolves worthy of the Nightborn court." His eyes swept the room and landed on Seraphine with obvious distaste. "The servants will be dressed uniformly. I want no distractions from our eligible wolves." The message was clear. Seraphine was to be invisible, a piece of furniture serving drinks while her betters competed for the ultimate prize. Later that night, as Seraphine pressed the black servant's dress that had been thrown at her, Ilara's voice seemed to whisper from memory. "Your wolf is not weak, child. It's sleeping, waiting for the right moment to wake." Her grandmother had told her this repeatedly in the months before her death, becoming more insistent even as the pack's healers declared her mind was failing. "There is old magic in our bloodline, Seraphine. Magic that frightens those who seek to control. When the time comes, your wolf will know." At the time, Seraphine had dismissed it as the rambling of a dying woman desperate to give her granddaughter hope. But sometimes, in the quiet hours before dawn, she felt something stirring deep within her, like a presence just beyond reach, watching, waiting. "Tomorrow night," she whispered to her reflection in the cracked mirror. "Tomorrow night, I'll watch everyone else find happiness while I serve drinks and try not to cry. And then life will go on exactly as it has been." But even as she said the words, something in her chest tightened, a feeling she couldn't name. Her wolf, usually so quiet she barely felt its presence, suddenly stirred with an awareness that made her breath catch. Deep in the forest beyond Crimson Vale territory, a massive black wolf ran through the moonlight, his silver eyes fixed on a destination he couldn't explain. King Valdrin hadn't told his advisors the real reason for attending a minor pack's mating ball. He'd been having dreams for months now, visions of silver eyes and a scent like wild jasmine and winter storms. His wolf, the most dominant in 5 generations, had become nearly uncontrollable, driving him to search every pack, every gathering, following an instinct that defied logic. Tonight, that instinct screamed that his search was finally ending. The Crimson Vale ballroom had been transformed into something from a fairy tale, all crystal chandeliers and flowing silk banners in the pack's signature crimson and gold. Seraphine stood against the far wall, with the other servants, a silver tray of champagne flutes balanced in her hands, trying to make herself as small and insignificant as possible. The unmated wolves had assembled in the center of the ballroom, the females in glittering gowns and the males in formal suits. Isolde stood in the front row, her emerald dress cut daringly low, positioned where she'd have the best chance of catching the Alpha King's eye, despite already being mated. The rumor was that her mate bond was weak, barely there, and she'd been making comments about how tragic it would be to miss one's true mate by settling too early. "He's here," someone hissed, and the entire room seemed to hold its breath. The massive oak doors opened, and King Valdrin entered with 4 of his elite guards. Seraphine had heard the descriptions, but nothing prepared her for the reality of him. He stood at least 6.5 feet tall, his frame powerfully built beneath an impeccably tailored black suit. His hair was dark as midnight, swept back to reveal sharp features that seemed carved from stone. But it was his eyes that stopped her heart, silver like moonlight on water, ancient and predatory. The power radiating from him made every wolf in the room instinctively lower their heads. This was dominance in its purest form, the kind of alpha presence that could force submission without a single word. Alpha Mordaunt rushed forward, bowing deeply. "Your Majesty, Crimson Vale is deeply honored by your presence. May I present our finest unmated wolves for your consideration?" Prosons. Valdrin's eyes swept across the assembled wolves, with methodical precision, and Seraphine saw hope bloom and die on face after face, as his gaze passed over them without interest. He looked bored, perhaps even disappointed. Then his head turned slightly, and those silver eyes locked directly onto her. The world stopped. Seraphine couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but stare back as something fundamental shifted in her chest. Her wolf, dormant for so long, suddenly surged forward with such force she nearly dropped her tray. A feeling like lightning and honey flooded her system, every nerve ending coming alive at once. "Mate." The word wasn't spoken aloud, but it echoed through her mind in a voice that was hers and not hers, her wolf finally awake and screaming with recognition. Valdrin had gone completely still, his nostrils flaring as he scented the air. His guards tensed, hands moving toward their weapons, clearly alarmed by their king's sudden change in demeanor. "Who?" Valdrin's voice was low, rough, sending shivers down Seraphine's spine. "Is that?" He was pointing directly at her. The ballroom erupted in confused whispers. Alpha Mordant turned, following the king's gesture, and his face purpled with rage and embarrassment when he saw what had captured the Alpha King's attention. Your Majesty, Mordaunt stammered. That is no one. Merely a servant. An Omega. I apologize if she has somehow offended. Her name. It wasn't a question but a command that made Mordaunt flinch. Seraphine, Your Majesty. She's not eligible. Not one of our presented wolves. She's serving drinks. Nothing more. Valdrin began walking toward her, and the crowd parted like water before him. Each step he took made Seraphine's heart pound harder, her wolf practically clawing at her skin trying to get closer to him. He stopped mere feet away, towering over her, and the scent of pine and thunderstorms rolled over her in waves. Up close, she could see the flecks of gold in his silver eyes, could feel the barely restrained power thrumming through him. Look at me, he said softly. And though his tone was gentle, it carried the weight of absolute authority. Seraphine raised her eyes to meet his, and the impact of that full connection nearly brought her to her knees. Come with me. Valdrin extended his hand, palm up, an invitation rather than a command. Around them, the ballroom had fallen into shocked silence. No one moved, no one even seemed to breathe. Your Majesty, Alpha Mordaunt tried again, desperation creeping into his voice. Surely there's been some mistake. Seraphine is just an Omega. She's not. Valdrin's head turned slowly toward the Alpha, and the look in his eyes made Mordaunt take 3 steps back. Are you suggesting I don't know my own mate when I'm standing before her? The word mate dropped into the silence like a boulder into still water. Someone gasped. Someone else whispered a prayer to the moon goddess. Isolde made a sound like she'd been physically struck. Seraphine's hands were shaking so badly that the champagne flutes on her tray began to rattle. This couldn't be real. This had to be some cruel joke. A nightmare. Anything but reality. Her voice came out barely a whisper. I'm nobody, Your Majesty. There must be some mistake. There's no mistake. Valdrin's voice gentled, but his eyes never left hers. I've been searching for you for 5 years. Every pack, every gathering, following a scent and a dream I couldn't explain. And here you are, serving drinks while your pack hides you in the shadows. He took the tray from her trembling hands and set it on a nearby table, without looking, his attention completely focused on her. Tell me your name. I want to hear it from your lips. Seraphine, she managed, her voice stronger now. Seraphine Ashford, Pa Seraphine. The way he said her name made something deep in her chest warm and unfurl. I am Valdrin Blackthorn, Alpha, King of the Nightborn Sovereignty, and you are my true mate. He spoke loud enough for everyone to hear, making it a public declaration that couldn't be taken back. Will you walk with me? There are things we need to discuss privately. It wasn't really a question, but he phrased it as one, giving her the illusion of choice. Seraphine glanced around the ballroom at the faces she'd known all her life. Her father stood near the back, his expression unreadable. Her mother had a hand pressed to her mouth, eyes wide with shock. Isolde looked like she wanted to shift and attack on the spot. Yes, Seraphine heard herself say. Yes, I'll walk with you. Valdrin offered his arm, and when Seraphine placed her hand in the crook of his elbow, a spark of electricity jumped between them. His wolf was right there. She could feel it. Powerful and dominant, yet somehow gentle as it reached out to brush against her own newly wakened wolf. Her wolf responded with a joy so pure, it brought tears to Seraphine's eyes. They walked out of the ballroom together, leaving chaos in their wake. Valdrin's guards followed at a discreet distance as he led her through the packhouse corridors to Alpha Mordaunt's private study, clearly having been briefed on the layout beforehand. Once inside, with the door closed behind them, Valdrin finally released her arm and stepped back, giving her space. Breathe, he said gently. You look like you're about to pass out. Seraphine realized she'd been holding her breath and let it out in a rush. I don't understand. How can I be your mate? I'm just an Omega. My wolf is weak, barely there. You're the Alpha King. This doesn't make sense. Your wolf isn't weak. Valdrin moved to the window, looking out at the moonlit forest. It's suppressed. I can feel it even now, fighting against something that's holding it back. He turned back to her, his silver eyes intense. Tell me about your family. Your bloodline. My father was Beta before I was born. My mother is from a minor alpha line. When I presented as Omega, it was considered a disgrace. They say there hasn't been an Omega in my father's line for 5 generations. And your grandmother? Seraphine blinked, surprised by the specific question. Elara? She died 2 years ago. Why? Before she died, did she ever tell you anything unusual? About your wolf? Your heritage? Anything that seemed strange? The memories came flooding back. She used to say my wolf was sleeping, not weak, that there was old magic in our bloodline. The healers thought she was losing her mind, but she became almost desperate about it toward the end, making me promise I'd remember. Seraphine wrapped her arms around herself. What does this have to do with anything? Valdrin crossed the room to her in 3 long strides, stopping just close enough that she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. May I? He raised his hand slowly toward her face. Seraphine nodded, not trusting her voice. His fingers brushed her cheek, and the moment they made contact, something exploded through her system. Not pain, but an overwhelming rush of sensation, as if every cell in her body had suddenly woken from a deep sleep. Her wolf surged forward with unprecedented strength, no longer the weak, barely there presence she'd known all her life, but something powerful and wild. Valdrin's eyes widened in shock, his hand still against her cheek. By the goddess, he breathed. You're not just my mate, you're something much more rare. The ballroom doors burst open as Valdrin led Seraphine back inside, his hand firmly clasped around hers. The mating ball had descended into barely controlled chaos in their absence, with wolves clustered in groups whispering frantically, shooting glances at the doors every few seconds. When the Alpha King appeared with the Omega servant, silence fell like an executioner's blade. Valdrin didn't release her hand as he addressed the room, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. I came to Crimson Vale following an instinct I couldn't explain. My wolf has been nearly uncontrollable for months, driving me to search every pack in the Northern Territories. His silver eyes swept across the assembled wolves. Now I know why. My true mate was here, hidden in plain sight, forced to serve while the rest of you competed for a bond that was never yours to claim. Alpha Mordaunt stepped forward, his face a mixture of shock and calculation. Your Majesty, this is unprecedented. Surely we can discuss this privately. Arrange a proper ABT. Arrange a proper arrange discuss. B. Ba. 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 There's nothing to discuss. Valdrin's tone could have frozen fire. Seraphine is my mate. That makes her your future queen. And from what I've observed, the way this pack has treated her is nothing short of criminal. Murmurs erupted throughout the room. Seraphine felt dozens of eyes on her, some shocked, some envious, others openly hostile. She wanted to disappear, to wake up from this impossible dream, but Valdrin's hand in hers kept her grounded. She's an Omega, someone called out from the crowd. Her wolf is weak. How can she possibly be queen? Valdrin's expression turned dangerous. Her wolf is not weak. It's been suppressed by old magic, likely placed on her bloodline generations ago. The question is why? He turned to face the crowd fully. Who here benefits from keeping powerful wolves suppressed? Who profits when those with dormant abilities never wake to their potential? The implication hung in the air like smoke. Old magic meant old families, old agreements, old crimes buried so deep that no one remembered the original sin. Seraphine's father, Tobias, pushed through the crowd. He looked older than Seraphine remembered, his face lined with years of stress and shame. Your Majesty, I swear I knew nothing of any suppression. When Seraphine presented as Omega, we accepted the moon goddess's designation. I stepped down as Beta because I felt I'd failed somehow, that my weakness had been passed to my daughter. You stepped down, Valdrin said coldly. Or were you forced to step down? Tell me, Tobias Ashford, what happened to your mother Elara in the years before she died? Who declared her mind failing? Who isolated her from the pack? Tobias's face went pale, the healers said. They said she was developing dementia, that her claims about old magic and sleeping wolves were delusions, convenient delusions. Valdrin's grip on Seraphine's hand tightened protectively, caping delusions, that kept anyone from investigating, whether there was truth to her words. Beta Lycaon stepped forward, his expression carefully neutral. Your Majesty, these are serious accusations. If there was a suppression curse placed on the Ashford line, it would require investigation, proper channels. The proper channel is standing right here. Valdrin pulled Seraphine forward gently. My mate bond broke through the suppression the moment I touched her. Whatever magic was binding, her wolf recognized true mate bonds as the exception. He addressed the room again. Seraphine will be coming with me to Nightborn territory tonight. Any who wish to challenge my claim may do so now. No one moved. Challenging an Alpha King's mate claim was essentially suicide, and everyone knew it. Isolde's voice rang out, sharp with barely contained rage. This is absurd. She's served us drinks for years. She's cleaned our floors, washed our clothes. How can someone like that suddenly become our queen? Someone like that, Valdrin repeated, his voice dropping to a lethal softness, has survived years of abuse and degradation without breaking. She's shown more strength than any warrior I've commanded. His eyes found Isolde in the crowd. Tell me, what have you survived besides your own mediocrity? Isolde's face flushed crimson, but she had no response. Valdrin turned to Alpha Mordant. I'll be leaving within the hour. Seraphine will gather her belongings, whatever little she's been allowed to have. I expect no interference. Of course, Your Majesty. Mordant bowed deeply, but Seraphine could see the fury and humiliation burning in his eyes. The Crimson Veil Pack wishes you both every happiness. Thank you have... The words were pretty, but everyone could hear the poison beneath them. As Valdrin led Seraphine from the ballroom, she heard the explosion of voices behind them, wolves erupting into frantic discussion the moment they were out of sight. Her life had just changed completely, irrevocably, in the space of an hour. I don't have much to pack, she said quietly as they climbed the stairs toward the servants' quarters. Just some clothes and a few things of my grandmother's. Then, we'll be quick. Valdrin paused at the base of the narrow stairs leading to her room, looking up at the cramped, dark corridor with barely concealed disgust. You've been living here? It's where servants stay. You are not a servant. The words came out as a growl, his wolf clearly close to the surface. You never were. Seraphine's room looked even more pathetic through someone else's eyes. The narrow cot with its thin blanket, the single wooden chair with a broken leg, the cracked mirror, the tiny window that barely let in light. This had been her world for years, and she'd told herself she was grateful just to have a space of her own. Valdrin stood in the doorway, too large for the cramped space, his presence filling it entirely. His hands were clenched at his sides, and she could feel his rage through the mate bond that was growing stronger by the minute. This is unacceptable, he said quietly, which was somehow more frightening than if he'd shouted. I should burn this entire pack house to the ground. Please don't. Seraphine pulled her grandmother's wooden box from beneath the bed, the only possession she truly valued. I know it's not much, but there are good wolves here. Wolves who have no power to change things. Good wolves, who stood by and watched you suffer. Wolves who were afraid to intervene. She opened the box, looking at the few treasures inside, her grandmother's silver bracelet, a pressed flower from her mother's garden, before everything changed, a letter her brother had sent years ago, before he stopped writing. Fear makes people cruel. I've learned that, if nothing else. Valdrin moved closer, looking down at the box's contents. What's that? He pointed to a small crystal vial tucked in the corner, filled with a silvery liquid that seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. I don't know. It was grandmother's. She made me promise to keep it safe, said I'd know when to use it. Seraphine picked up the vial carefully. It was warm to the touch, which shouldn't be possible. She gave it to me the night before she died, told me to drink it when I felt my wolf truly waking, power. May I see it? Seraphine handed him the vial, and the moment it touched his palm, the liquid inside began to glow brighter, pulsing with light that matched the rhythm of a heartbeat. This is old magic, Valdrin said, his voice filled with awe. Very old. Crafted by someone with intimate knowledge of bloodline curses and binding spells. He looked at her with new understanding. Your grandmother knew. She knew what had been done to your line, and she created a counterspell. This will break the suppression completely. Seraphine's heart raced. Are you sure? What if it's dangerous? What if... The only danger is in not using it. He handed the vial back to her. Right now, only my touch as your mate has weakened the binding. But it's still there, still holding your wolf back. This will free you completely. He paused. But I should warn you, the transformation won't be comfortable. Breaking a multi-generational curse never is. Will you stay with me? I'm not going anywhere. The promise in his voice was absolute. Seraphine uncorked the vial, and the scent that emerged was like moonlight given physical form, wild and ancient and impossibly pure. She thought of her grandmother, of all the years Ilara had been dismissed as confused, losing her mind, when in reality she'd been fighting a secret battle to save her granddaughter. For you, grandmother, Seraphine whispered, and drank. The effect was instantaneous and overwhelming. The liquid burned down her throat like liquid starlight, spreading through her veins, with a heat that built and built until she thought she might combust from the inside out. She felt the binding break with an almost audible snap, and her wolf, her real wolf, surged forward with a force that drove her to her knees. Valdrin was beside her immediately, his hands on her shoulders, anchoring her. Let it happen, don't fight it. The transformation hit like an avalanche. Seraphine's bones cracked and reformed, her skin splitting to make way for fur. But unlike every previous shift that had been painful and incomplete, this one felt right. Her wolf poured into being with a joy so pure, it manifested as a howl that shattered the small window and echoed through the entire pack house. When the transformation completed, Seraphine stood on 4 legs and looked down at herself in shock. Her wolf form was massive, far larger than any Omega should be, nearly the size of an alpha. Her fur was pure silver that seemed to shimmer with an inner light, and when she moved, it was with a grace and power she'd never experienced before. Valdrin had shifted as well, his enormous black wolf circling her with obvious admiration. Through the mate bond, she felt his wolf's reaction. Pride, possessiveness, and something that felt like relief, so profound it brought tears to her wolf's eyes. Beautiful. His voice echoed in her mind through the mate bond. Perfect. This is what you were always meant to be. Seraphine looked at her reflection in the cracked mirror and barely recognized herself. This wolf bore no resemblance to the weak, patchy creature she'd been before. This was a wolf of power, of nobility, of strength. Below, she heard shouting as the pack reacted to her howl. Feet pounded on stairs, voices raised in alarm and confusion. We should show them, Valdrin's voice suggested. Let them see what they tried to keep hidden. Together, they shifted back. Seraphine stood before him, no longer hunched and trying to be small, but straight and tall. Prosody. The change wasn't just physical. Something fundamental had shifted in how she carried herself, how she existed in space. How do you feel? Valdrin asked, brushing a strand of silver hair from her face. Silver hair that had been mousy brown just minutes ago. I feel. Seraphine searched for words. Like I've been underwater my whole life and just broke the surface. Like I can finally breathe. The door burst open, and Alpha Mordant stood there with a dozen pack members behind him, weapons drawn. They'd clearly expected some kind of attack, but they froze at the sight of Seraphine, their faces registering shock and something that looked like fear. What is she? Someone whispered. Valdrin smiled, sharp and dangerous. She's exactly what your pack has been trying to suppress for generations. A true alpha bloodline, hidden beneath an Omega designation through dark magic. He put his arm around Seraphine's shoulders. And now she's awake. The convoy that Valdrin had brought to Crimson Vale consisted of 6 armored vehicles, all black with the Nightborn Sovereignty's silver wolf insignia. Elite guards stood at attention as Valdrin led Seraphine out of the pack house, her single bag of belongings looking pathetic in her hands. The entire Crimson Vale pack had assembled in the courtyard, summoned by Alpha Mordaunt to witness the departure. It was meant to be ceremonial, a show of respect for the Alpha King, but Seraphine could feel the undercurrents of shock and resentment rippling through the crowd. Her father stood near the front, and for the first time in years, he met her eyes directly. Seraphine. Pyres, he called out, his voice breaking slightly. I didn't know. About the curse, about what was done to our line. You have to believe me. Seraphine paused, studying the man who'd once carried her on his shoulders and called her his little moon. The man who'd later avoided looking at her, as if her very existence caused him pain. Maybe you didn't know, she said quietly, but you also didn't question process. When grandmother tried to tell you something was wrong, you believed the healers who called her mad. When I suffered, you looked away. Not knowing isn't the same as being innocent. Tobias flinched as if she'd struck him. I'm sorry. I know it's not enough, but I am truly sorry. I know. And strangely, she did. She could feel through her newly awakened senses that his regret was genuine, even if it came too late to matter. Goodbye, father. Her mother remained at the back of the crowd, her face carefully blank. They hadn't spoken since the ballroom revelation, and Celeste clearly had no intention of changing that now. Some wounds were too deep to heal. Isolde pushed through the crowd, her face twisted with bitterness. You think you've won something, but you're still the same weak Omega who scrubbed our floors. A pretty collar doesn't make you a queen. Before Seraphine could respond, Valdrin moved with speed that blurred, his hand wrapping around Isolde's throat and lifting her onto her toes. You will address your future queen with respect, he said softly, or you will lose your tongue. Choose. Quote, I'm sorry. Isolde gasped out, terror replacing her bravado. I'm sorry, Your Majesty. Valdrin released her with obvious disgust, and she crumpled to the ground, coughing. He turned to address the crowd. Seraphine is my mate, and will be queen of the Nightborn sovereignty. Any who insult her, insult me. Any who threaten her, threaten me. And I promise you, I am not nearly as forgiving as she is. He opened the door of the lead vehicle for Seraphine, and she climbed in, leaving behind the only home she'd ever known. As the convoy pulled away, she watched Crimson Veil disappear in the rearview mirror and felt no sadness, only relief. The journey to Nightborn territory took 6 hours through increasingly wild landscape. Valdrin sat beside her, occasionally pointing out landmarks, but mostly just letting her process in silence. An older woman rode in the back seat, her keen eyes assessing Seraphine with interest. This is Mirella, Valdrin introduced. She's been my grandmother's closest friend for 50 years and knows more about bloodline curses than anyone alive. She'll be working with you. Working with me? Seraphine asked. Your wolf is awake now, but you have 23 years of missed training to make up for, Mirella said, her voice surprisingly gentle. You'll need to learn to shift properly, to fight, to command. You'll need to understand your new abilities and the political landscape you're entering. You'll need to become the queen our people deserve. Powers. The weight of it all threatened to crush her. What if I can't? What if I'm not strong enough? You survived years of abuse and degradation without losing your kindness, Mirella replied. You kept hope when you had every reason to give up. That kind of strength can't be taught, Seraphine. Everything else, we can handle. They arrived at Nightborn territory as the sun was setting, and Seraphine's breath caught at the sight. Unlike Crimson Veil's rustic pack house, the Nightborn sovereignty was a fortress city carved into a mountainside. Stone towers rose toward the sky, connected by bridges that seemed to defy gravity. Thousands of wolves lived here. She could sense them, a thrumming mass of life and power that made her newly awakened wolf perk up with interest. Welcome home, Valdrin said softly. Home. The word felt foreign and precious all at once. The wolves of Nightborn lined the streets as their convoy passed, all bowing in respect. Some stared at Seraphine with open curiosity, others with calculation. She was entering a world of power and politics, where her every move would be scrutinized. The royal residence was at the peak of the mountain, a sprawling complex of stone and glass that offered panoramic views of the territory. Servants rushed to attend them as they entered, but these servants moved with dignity, not fear. She could feel the difference in how Valdrin ran his territory compared to Crimson Veil. Your quarters? Valdrin gestured to a set of massive doors, connected to mine by a private hallway, if you want privacy but also want me close. The rooms beyond were larger than the entire servants' quarters at Crimson Veil. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the territory. A massive bed dominated one wall, and there was an entire sitting room with more books than Seraphine had seen in her life. This is too much, she whispered. This is what you deserve. Valdrin turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. I know everything is moving fast. I know you're overwhelmed, but I need you to understand something. You're safe here. No one will hurt you, belittle you, or make you feel small. You're my mate and my equal, and everyone in Nightborn will treat you accordingly or answer to me. Seraphine felt tears threatening. Why me? You're the Alpha King. You could have had anyone. The moon goddess doesn't make mistakes. He brushed his thumb across her cheek. You're exactly who I was meant to find. Now rest, tomorrow. Your real education begins. The Elder Council of the Nightborn Sovereignty met in a circular chamber beneath the mountain, a place where the oldest and most powerful wolves had gathered for generations to advise the Alpha King. Valdrin had warned Seraphine that this meeting would happen, that she would need to prove herself to wolves who'd served his family for decades. She entered the chamber, dressed in formal attire that Morella had provided, a deep purple gown that somehow made her newly silver hair look even more striking. 7 elders sat in high-backed chairs, their faces carefully neutral as they assessed her. Elder Council, Valdrin began, standing beside Seraphine. I present to you my mate, Seraphine Ashford, who will be your queen. Ah, an Omega, Elder Corvus said flatly. The eldest member of the council, he'd been advisor to Valdrin's grandfather. You've brought us an Omega to be queen. I've brought you my true mate. Valdrin corrected, steel in his voice. The designation she was born with is irrelevant. Is it? Elder Sage, one of the few female elders, leaned forward. The Nightborn sovereignty has never had an Omega queen. Our people will question her ability to lead, her strength in battle, her capacity to command respect. And then they'll learn differently. Seraphine spoke for the first time, her voice steady despite her nervousness. I didn't ask for this position. I didn't seek it out. But the moon goddess chose me as the Alpha King's mate, and I will not insult her wisdom by shrinking from the responsibility. Pretty words, Corvus said dismissively, but words mean nothing. The Blackstone Pack has already sent word, questioning your legitimacy. They're demanding proof that you're worthy to be queen. Not just a weak wolf the Alpha King took pity on. Valdrin's growl filled the chamber, but Seraphine placed a hand on his arm, calming him. What kind of proof? The elders exchanged glances. A trial, Sage said carefully. 3 challenges that demonstrate strength, wisdom, and capability. If you pass, the council will accept you fully. If you fail. She trailed off. The implication clear. And if I refuse? Then the council will always see you as nothing more than the Alpha King's weakness, Corvus said bluntly. A liability to be tolerated but never respected. Seraphine thought of the years she'd spent being dismissed, overlooked, treated as less than. She thought of her grandmother's sacrifice, of the power that had been suppressed for generations. She thought of the Omega children who might grow up in a world where their designation didn't determine their destiny. I accept, she said. Name your challenges. Over the next week, word spread throughout the Northern Territories that the Alpha King's new mate would be undergoing the Elder Council's trials. Delegations from allied packs began arriving, some genuinely curious, others hoping to witness her failure. Among them was a group from the Silvermist Pack, and when Seraphine saw who led them, her heart nearly stopped. Cassian, her older brother, stood in the great hall, his expression unreadable as he bowed formally. Your Majesty, he said to Valdrin, then turned to her. Seraphine, you came. She couldn't keep the bitterness from her voice. After 6 years of silence, you came to watch me be tested. I came to watch you succeed. His eyes met hers, and she saw genuine remorse there. I was a coward, sister. I ran rather than stand with you. I let our parents' shame become my own. But when word reached Silvermist about what happened, about what you really are, he trailed off. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I'm here now, even if it's too late. Before she could respond, the chamber doors opened, and 3 more wolves entered, but these weren't delegates from allied packs. These were Omegas, 2 females and 1 male, all wearing the simple clothing of servants. Your Majesty, the male Omega spoke, addressing Valdrin but glancing at Seraphine. We've come from 3 different packs. We heard that an Omega was becoming queen, and we had to see it for ourselves. We had to know if it's really possible. The hope in their eyes broke something in Seraphine's chest and rebuilt it stronger. She stepped forward, ignoring protocol. What are your names? I'm Finn, the male said. This is Lyra and Roslyn. We're nobody important. We just We wanted to see. You're not nobody. Seraphine took Lyra's hands, feeling the familiar calluses of someone who'd spent years in service. You're exactly why I'm going to pass these trials. Not for the Elder Council, not for politics, but for every Omega who's been told they're worth less than others. For every wolf who's been forced to make themselves small to survive. By the day of the first trial, the Nightborn arena was packed with wolves from across the Northern Territories. The Elder Council sat in positions of honor, their faces impassive. Valdrin stood to the side, forced by tradition to watch but not intervene. The first trial, Elder Corvus announced, his voice carrying across the arena, is strength. An Omega's designation makes them the weakest among wolves. To be queen, you must prove that you possess the physical power to protect our people. A gate opened across the arena, and Seraphine's opponent entered. He was massive, an alpha warrior named Kellen, who'd won the last 3 sovereignty tournaments. His reputation for brutality was well known. This is madness, Cassian hissed from his seat. They're trying to get her killed. But Seraphine felt calm as she stepped into the arena, her newly awakened wolf rising to the surface. The suppression curse had been broken. She was no longer the weak Omega who couldn't hold a shift. She was something the Council had never seen before. She shifted in one fluid motion, her silver wolf form emerging with a power that made the crowd gasp. Kellen charged immediately, expecting an easy victory. What he got was a wolf who moved like liquid silver, dodging his attack and countering with a strike that sent him sprawling. The fight lasted 7 minutes. When it ended, Kellen lay on his back in submission, and Seraphine stood over him, victorious. The second trial came 3 days later, designed to test wisdom. The Elder Council presented Seraphine with a real political crisis. 3 allied pacts were on the brink of war over territory disputes, and she had 1 hour to propose a solution that would satisfy all parties. Seraphine requested maps and records, then did something unexpected. She called in the 3 Omegas who'd come to watch her trials, asking them about the disputed territories from a servant's perspective. What did the land actually provide? Who really used it? What did the common wolves need versus what the alphas wanted? Her solution was elegant. Divide the territory not by pack boundaries, but by resource type, creating a shared management system where each pack specialized in what they did best and traded freely. It required cooperation instead of conquest, mutual benefit instead of dominance. The Elder Council voted unanimously to accept her solution, and more importantly, the 3 disputing alphas agreed to implement it. She thinks like an Omega, Elder Sage observed to Valdrin privately. She sees the web of connections, the interdependencies. She sees the value in cooperation, where we see only competition. She thinks like a queen, Valdrin corrected. But the third trial would prove the most challenging. The test of capability required Seraphine to do something that no Omega had ever done. Lead a patrol of alpha warriors on a real mission into disputed territory where rogue wolves had been spotted. The warriors assigned to her, all battle-hardened alphas, made their skepticism clear from the start. Their leader, a scarred veteran named Dax, looked at Seraphine with barely concealed contempt as they assembled for the mission. "With all due respect, Your Majesty," Dax said, managing to make the title sound like an insult, "Omegas don't lead combat missions. They stay home where it's safe." "Then it's a good thing I'm not just an Omega anymore," Seraphine replied evenly. "And you'll show respect, not because I demand it, but because I'll earn it. Now brief me on the situation." The rogue wolves had been raiding small settlements along the border, hitting fast and disappearing before patrols could respond. Traditional alpha tactics had failed because they were too predictable, too focused on direct confrontation. Seraphine studied the pattern of attacks and saw something others had missed. They're not random raids. They're testing our defenses, looking for weaknesses, processes. They're going to hit the Riverside settlement next, but not tonight. Tomorrow night, when we've all been waiting so long, we're complacent. That's speculation, Dax argued. It's pattern recognition, something Omegas excel at because we spend our lives reading situations to stay safe. She began marking the map. We set a trap. Make it look like Riverside is vulnerable, but have 2 teams in position to flank them when they attack. The warriors exchanged doubtful glances, but orders were orders. They moved into position, waiting through a tense day and into the evening. Some of the alphas grumbled that they were wasting time following an Omega's hunch. Then, just as Seraphine predicted, the rogues attacked. The trap worked perfectly. The rogues found themselves surrounded, and Seraphine led the interrogation that revealed they weren't just raiders, but scouts for a larger force, planning to challenge Nightborn sovereignty. Dax approached her after the mission, his expression thoughtful. "I was wrong about you," he said simply. "You'll make a good queen." But the intelligence they'd gathered from the rogues was troubling. A wolf named Thaddeus, former alpha of a pack that Valdrin had absorbed years ago, was building an army. He'd been spreading rumors that the Alpha King had been weakened by choosing an Omega mate, that Nightborn sovereignty was vulnerable. "He's going to challenge you," Mirella said during the war council that followed. "He'll invoke the ancient right, demand a formal challenge for leadership." "Let him come," Valdrin growled. "I'll destroy him." "No," Seraphine spoke up, and all eyes turned to her. "He's not really challenging you, he's challenging me. His entire strategy is based on the belief that I'm your weakness. We need to prove him wrong." Over the following weeks, Seraphine did something unprecedented. She began training with both the warriors and the Omegas. She taught the warriors pattern recognition and strategic thinking beyond brute force. She taught the Omegas self-defense and confidence. Finn, Lyra, and Roslyn had stayed in Nightborn territory, and they became her closest students. Under her guidance, they began to transform, standing taller, speaking up, discovering that their designation didn't define their worth. "You're building an army," Cassian observed, watching a training session where Omegas and Alphas worked together for the first time. "I'm building a community," Seraphine corrected. "An army divides the strong from the weak. A community recognizes that everyone has value." Word spread throughout the northern territories of the changes in Nightborn. Omegas began arriving from other packs, seeking sanctuary and training. Some alphas complained about the disruption to traditional hierarchies. Others saw the strength in Seraphine's approach and began implementing similar changes in their own packs. When Thaddeus finally arrived with his army of 200 rogue wolves, demanding a challenge, he found himself facing something he hadn't anticipated. A united Nightborn where every wolf, regardless of designation, stood ready to defend their territory and their queen. Thaddeus made his challenge formal in the traditional way, appearing at the boundary of Nightborn territory, with his army visible behind him, a show of force meant to intimidate. He was a massive wolf in his human form, scarred from countless battles, his eyes hard with ambition and resentment. "Valdrin Blackthorn," he called out, his voice carrying across the valley. "I challenge your right to lead. You've grown weak, choosing an Omega as mate, allowing soft policies to infect your territory. The northern packs need strong leadership, not this mockery of tradition." Valdrin stood at the edge of his territory, Seraphine beside him, their combined guards arrayed behind them. "You challenge me based on old grievances and wounded pride. Thaddeus, your pack was absorbed, because you were leading your wolves to starvation through incompetence." "My pack was stolen," Thaddeus roared. "And now you parade around with your Omega Queen, pretending she's your equal. Everyone knows she's just a warm body in your bed, a pretty collar to show off." The insult hung in the air. Valdrin moved to step forward, but Seraphine put a hand on his arm, stopping him. "I'll fight him," she said quietly. "Absolutely not." Valdrin's voice was flat with denial. "He's challenging me, not you. His entire strategy relies on painting me as your weakness. We can't prove him wrong by hiding me behind your strength." She turned to face him fully. "You said I was your equal. Let me prove it." "You've been training for weeks, not years. He's a seasoned warrior. Who's never fought someone like me?" Seraphine's newly awakened confidence showed in every line of her body. "Trust me. Trust your mate." The look Valdrin gave her was tortured, torn between his protective instincts and his respect for her agency. Finally, he nodded, but the gesture cost him something. Seraphine stepped forward, raising her voice. "Thaddeus, I am Seraphine Blackthorn, Queen of Nightborn Sovereignty. You insult me, you insult my mate, and you insult every wolf who's found strength beyond traditional definitions. I accept your challenge." Laughter rippled through Thaddeus's army. The man himself looked delighted. An Omega wants to fight me? This will be over in seconds. Then you have nothing to worry about? Seraphine began removing her formal jacket, standing in the simple training clothes beneath. Do you accept? Or are you afraid? The challenge to his courage worked perfectly. Thaddeus couldn't back down without looking weak before his own followers. I accept. When I kill you, Valdrin will be broken, and Nightborn will fall. The traditional challenge ground was a circular arena formed by natural rock formations. As Seraphine and Thaddeus entered, hundreds of wolves gathered around the edges. Every wolf from Nightborn had come, along with Thaddeus's army, and delegations from allied packs who'd arrived to witness the spectacle. First blood or submission? The traditional arbiter asked. Death, Thaddeus said, grinning. Submission, Seraphine countered. I'm not a murderer. Whichever comes first. Then, the arbiter decided. The fight began with Thaddeus, shifting immediately into his wolf form, a massive brown beast built for power. He charged with the confidence of someone who'd never lost a challenge, expecting to crush this Omega in seconds. Seraphine shifted too, her silver wolf form emerging with fluid grace. But instead of meeting his charge head-on, she moved like water, flowing around his attack and scoring a slash across his flank as she passed. Thaddeus spun, surprised by her speed. He attacked again, more carefully this time, but Seraphine had spent weeks training with Dax and the other warriors. More importantly, she'd spent years learning to read opponents, to anticipate moves, to survive by being smarter rather than stronger. The fight became a dance. Thaddeus had raw power, but Seraphine had strategy. Every time he thought he had her cornered, she found a way out. Every time he committed to an attack, she made him pay for the opening it created. She's toying with him, Cassian breathed from the sidelines, watching in awe. She's teaching him, Valdrin corrected, pride evident in his voice. Watch. Indeed, as the fight continued, Seraphine began to demonstrate techniques to the watching crowd. She showed how leverage could overcome strength, how reading body language could predict attacks, how endurance could outlast power. Thaddeus was tiring, his attacks becoming sloppier. The confidence in his eyes had turned to frustration, then to fear as he realized he was losing to an Omega in front of everyone. Finally, Seraphine saw her opening. She feinted left, and when Thaddeus committed to blocking, she went right, getting behind him and locking her jaws on the back of his neck, the traditional submission hold. She could have crushed his spine, but she held the pressure at exactly the point where he couldn't escape, but wasn't seriously injured. Yield. She projected through the mind link that all wolves could hear during challenges. Thaddeus struggled for a moment, but her position was perfect. I yield, he finally gasped. Seraphine released him immediately, stepping back and shifting to human form. She stood over him as he shifted back as well, breathing hard, defeated. You challenged me because you thought Omega meant weak, Seraphine said, loud enough for everyone to hear. You thought my designation defined my capabilities. But strength comes in many forms, Thaddeus. Power isn't just about who can hit hardest. It's about who can think clearest, adapt fastest, and inspire others to follow. She extended her hand to help him up. He stared at it for a long moment, then took it, letting her pull him to his feet. Your army, Seraphine continued, turning to address his followers. You followed Thaddeus because you felt abandoned by the system, pushed aside, forgotten. I understand that feeling, but violence isn't the answer. Join us instead. Help us build something better than the old ways. Help us create a world where every wolf has value, regardless of designation. For a long moment, no one moved. Then, one by one, Thaddeus's soldiers began to kneel, not in submission to force, but in acceptance of her offer. Thaddeus himself knelt last. I was wrong, he said simply, about everything. The Elder Council, watching from their position of honor, exchanged glances. Elder Corvus rose to his feet, and silence fell over the arena. The trials are complete, he announced. Seraphine Blackthorn has demonstrated strength, wisdom, and capability beyond question. The Elder Council unanimously recognizes her as Queen of Nightborn sovereignty. 1. The cheers that erupted shook the mountain itself. 6 months had passed since Seraphine's coronation, and the Northern Territories had transformed in ways that would have been unimaginable a year ago. The Nightborn sovereignty had become a beacon. Wolves from across the continent traveling to see the Omega Queen who'd changed everything. Seraphine stood in the new training center she'd established, watching as Omegas and Alphas sparred together, learning from each other's strengths. Finn had become one of her best instructors, his gentle teaching style perfect for wolves learning to fight for the first time. Lyra ran the administrative offices with efficiency that put the old stewards to shame. Roslyn had discovered a talent for healing and was studying with the pack doctors. The Council of Allied Packs is requesting another meeting, Mirella said, approaching with a stack of correspondence. They want to discuss implementing your designation blind policies across all territories. Closed. Requesting, not demanding? Seraphine smiled. 6 months ago, they'd been demanding she prove herself. Now they were asking for her guidance. Times change. Mirella's eyes twinkled. Queens make them change faster. Valdrin found her later in their private quarters, reviewing proposals for new Omega education programs. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, pulling her against his chest. You're working too hard, he murmured against her neck. Says the Alpha King, who didn't sleep last night because he was reviewing Border Patrol reports. That's different. How? Because I'm used to it. He turned her to face him. You don't have to save everyone, Seraphine. I'm not trying to save everyone. I'm trying to give them the chance to save themselves. She touched his face gently. The way you gave me that chance. I didn't give you anything. I just saw what was already there. The mate bond between them had only grown stronger over the months. They'd completed the formal mating ceremony, the mark on her neck, a visible sign of their bond. But more than that, they'd built a partnership based on mutual respect and shared vision. A knock interrupted them. Cassian entered, now serving as one of Seraphine's personal advisors. He'd requested the transfer from Silver Mist Pack, determined to make up for his years of absence. The delegation from Crimson Vale has arrived, he announced. Seraphine exchanged a glance with Valdrin. This would be the first time she'd seen her former pack since leaving. Alpha Mordaunt had requested the meeting, claiming he wanted to discuss alliance terms, but everyone suspected there was more to it. The Crimson Vale delegation waited in the formal receiving room. Alpha Mordaunt looked older, diminished somehow. Beside him stood Seraphine's parents, both looking uncomfortable in the formal setting. Your Majesty, Mordaunt bowed deeply. Thank you for receiving us. Alpha Mordaunt. Seraphine's voice was cool but not hostile. What brings you to Nightborn? We've come to formally apologize. The word seemed to cost him something. For the years of mistreatment, for the injustice, for failing to see what you truly were. And, he hesitated, to request your guidance. Crimson Vale has suffered since you left. Wolves are leaving, seeking the opportunities you've created here. We're becoming a territory of the old ways, while the world changes around us. Tobias stepped forward. Seraphine, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it, but I want you to know that I've been investigating what happened to Mother, to our bloodline. There were documents hidden in the pack archives, evidence of a binding curse placed 3 generations ago. It was ordered by the Alpha Council at the time, carried out in secret. They feared our line was becoming too powerful. I know, Seraphine said quietly. I've been conducting my own investigation. The curse wasn't unique to my family. Dozens of powerful bloodlines were suppressed over the generations, all in the name of maintaining the traditional hierarchy. We'd like to make amends. Celeste spoke for the first time, her voice trembling. Not just for you, but for all the Omegas we failed. We've begun implementing changes in Crimson Vale, using your policies as a template. It's slow, but it's happening. Seraphine studied her parents, feeling the complex tangle of emotions through her newly heightened senses. Anger was there, yes, but also a strange kind of pity. They'd been victims of the same corrupt system, just in a different way. Quote, I'll send advisors to help with your transition, she said finally. Not for your sake, but for the Omegas still suffering in your territory. They deserve better, even if you don't. The relief on their faces was palpable. Thank you, Tobias whispered. After they left, Valdrin pulled her close. That was generous of you. It was strategic. One pack changing isn't enough. We need systemic change across all territories. She leaned into his embrace, quote, Besides, holding on to anger would only hurt me, not them. My wise queen, he murmured, and she heard the pride in his voice. 1 year after the mating ball that changed everything, Seraphine stood on the balcony of the Nightborn royal residence, watching the sun set over her territory. A year ago, she'd been serving drinks and trying to survive another day. Now, she was queen, mate to the Alpha King, an architect of a social revolution that was reshaping wolf society. Auntie Sarah! A small voice called out, and Seraphine turned to see 3 Omega pups running toward her, Finn and Lyra's children. They'd been born just 6 months ago, the first litter in Nightborn, where the parents openly celebrated having Omega pups, rather than treating it as a shameful secret. Quote, "What are you 3 doing up here?" Seraphine asked, catching the smallest one as she stumbled. "Mama said we could watch the moon rise with you," the pup said. "And Papa said you'd tell us the story." "What story?" "The one about the Omega who became queen." Seraphine laughed, settling onto the bench with the pups climbing into her lap. "That story again? Haven't you heard it enough?" "No," they chorused. Valdrin emerged from inside, carrying a tray with tea and cookies. "I think this is the 15th time this month," he said, but his smile was indulgent as he settled beside them. "Once upon a time," Seraphine began, "there was an Omega who everyone thought was weak and worthless. She spent her days scrubbing floors and her nights wondering if there was more to life than suffering." "But she wasn't weak," the middle pup interrupted. "No, she wasn't. She was strong in ways that no one could see. And one night, at a ball where she was forced to serve drinks while others danced, something magical happened." As Seraphine told the story, other wolves began to gather on the balcony. Mirella came with her evening tea, Cassian arrived with reports that could wait until morning, Dax and his warriors stopped by after their patrol. Even Elder Corvus appeared, his formerly stern face softened with something like affection. They all wanted to hear the story, this tale of transformation that had become legend even while it was still being written. And the Omega Queen, Seraphine concluded as the moon rose full and bright above them, learned that her worth was never determined by what others called her, but by what she chose to become. She learned that strength comes in many forms, that power can be gentle, and that the greatest changes often come from the most unexpected places. "Do you think there will be more Omega Queens?" the smallest pup asked sleepily. "I think there will be queens of all designations," Seraphine replied, smoothing the pup's fur. "Because we've learned that what matters isn't the label we're given at birth, power, but the choices we make, the courage we show, and the kindness we share." Later, after the pups had been carried home by their parents and the other wolves had drifted away, Seraphine and Valdrin stood alone under the stars. "Any regrets?" he asked softly. "About which part? Being forced to serve at a ball? Being rejected by my pack? Nearly dying from a suppression curse? About any of it?" Seraphine thought about the question seriously. A year ago, she would have said she'd give anything to change her past. But now, understanding how every moment of suffering had forged her into who she'd become, how her experience gave her the insight to help others. "No," she said finally. "No regrets. Every painful moment led me here, to you, to this life, to the ability to change things for others. I wouldn't trade that for anything. My fierce, beautiful mate." Valdrin pulled her close, and she felt the steady beat of his heart against hers, the mate, bond singing between them with a contentment that went soul deep. In the distance, she could hear wolves howling to the moon, the traditional song of her people. But tonight, the voices were different. Alpha and Omega, Beta and Delta, all singing together in harmony that would have been impossible a year ago. Seraphine added her voice to theirs, a howl of joy and triumph and hope. Valdrin joined her, their voices intertwining, and across the territory, hundreds more responded. "They say the cruelest fate for an Omega is to serve while others find their destiny. But what they don't tell you is that sometimes, the server becomes the queen. Sometimes, the rejected becomes the chosen. Sometimes, the wolf everyone overlooked changes the entire world." And as the moon shone down on Nightborn sovereignty, illuminating a territory where every wolf had value and every voice could be heard, Seraphine knew that this was just the beginning. The old ways were crumbling, and the new ones being built in their place would ensure that no wolf, regardless of designation, would ever again be forced to hide their light or shrink their spirit. The Omega who'd served drinks at the mating ball had become queen, and in doing so, she'd proven that the greatest power isn't in domination or force, but in the courage to stand tall when the world tells you to kneel, to speak when others demand silence, and to believe in your worth even when everyone else has forgotten it. This was her legacy, her gift to the future. A world where every wolf, from the lowliest Omega to the mightiest Alpha, could look at the Queen and see proof that they too could rise, could change, could become something more than what others expected. And that was worth more than any crown,